is this interpretation.
All right, good evening, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Conscientious Emergence. Right now, I'm going to start in with this background here. And there's going to be sort of a deep mountainscape with the peaks sort of pointy like that. And then a fieldish, goldish, fieldish area where I'm probably going to set a city in the background. And then I think I'm going to have a pod of sleeping whales sort of peopling this upper portion. But that's a long ways from now. So for the moment, I'm just going to drop in some color for the mountainscape.
However, he then extrapolates that and says, this expertise allows me to make conclusions like the Greek translation of the Old Testament is not a translation, it's the original. And the Hebrew is the translation. When of the tens of thousands of Septuagintal scholars, so that's the Greek translation of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, no one holds that position.
Right.
Not like there's a contingent here. Nobody. And I think, unfortunately, it's emblematic of the fact that specificity and expertise in one area does not necessarily then extrapolate it into all of the areas that could possibly be adjacent to that.
That's a good point.
It's almost flattering. They sit there and say, oh, he surely knows his Greek. Right? Oh, but he only knows his classical Greek, not his Koine, right? And then they'll say in a couple sentences, oh, he sure knows his Greek. You know why? Because they're watching me use it.
See the problem?
Absolutely. They're giving him too much credit, and he sees that, and he's absorbing, I'm an expert in Greek. I also found it interesting, Kip immediately almost backpedals when he says, like, and he may not have the full picture of what you're trying to get at here when he said that, but his point about the misuse of medical interpretations of words and applying them, Christing, these kinds of things in different contexts. The other thing, and I'd love to have you just chime in here to give your whole perspective here, that is, when I'm seeing all of these different people constantly say expert in Greek, Amen is creating, because these guys are taking him so serious as a Greek expert, he's creating an environment where guys like Kip and Dan McClellan, who engage in not only Dead Sea Scroll and Septuagint Hebrew Bible study, but the New Testament study, it perpetrates the common myth that Litwa, Robin Faith Walsh, Dennis McDonald, and other experts have been pointing out about how Hellenized, there is no dividing wall of difference between Koine Greek here, and like you pointed out with Plato, or using classical Greek sources. Guys, that's fringe. Stop doing that with New Testament studies. It actually creates a negative environment for the scholarship that Myth Vision wants to peddle and push forward, rather than the age-old, Jews have these ideas completely isolated from the Greco-Roman or classical world, and therefore we should not be using that as an interpretive possible framework. Because what's he doing? He's pulling poop-mouthing and Christing and little boys and gardens and stuff and making them go, classicists should not do this. But is he really a bona fide classicist in Greek, Stephen? That's the
there's some myth-making going on here, and the myth-making that's coming out of the mouths of people that I respect.
Right.
They're making this way too complicated, right? Like, Hellenistic Greek texts are built on the foundation of classical Greek. That's the foundation. The common dialect is common Attic, right? Mixed with Ionic. And you can't construct this wall, this dividing wall between the New Testament and classical sources with respect to language. Language changes over time. The meaning of words change over time. There are Hellenistic era lexicons that I go into detail in my video about that were created in the first few centuries AD to help define words from Attic Greek and define words from Homer that had either dropped out of the language or changed meaning. There's definitely a change in meaning, but that change isn't necessarily associated with the development of the Hellenistiki dialectos, the common Hellenistic dialect that emerged from the leveling of all of the different dialects and the sort of merging emergence in the wake of Alexander the Great. of a new form of Greek that was just the lingua franca. Like it was based on Attic Greek, and everybody could read those Attic texts. Everybody who is writing in the New Testament is obviously has some training. And what were they trained on? They're trained on Plato. They're trained on these Attic texts. So you can't. It is so contradictory to say, oh, he's so good at Greek, but only classical Greek, and that is what prevents him from properly interpreting the New Testament. Like that's wrong, because the implication of that logic is that you can't take anyone seriously if they have a background in classical Greek, because they're all going to fall into this trap.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm pushing back on here, is this idea that, oh no, Koine is different, and he's really good at classical Greek, he just needs to stay in his lane.
Yeah,
right?
he said that, and then Dan added his own 2 cents of kind of isolating the Greeks, separating them completely, and doing that. Again, that is not the same apologetics that I've been dealing with, but it is a form of like this apologetic of like getting people out of the way who are in the classics arena. And I would not put any other classical scholars into that arena. At best, you could probably include Karl Ruck, because he brings a lot of these kind of like drug-induced kind of interpretations from the Greek world that are typically in these other texts from Apples of Apollo and such, and then sometimes might potentially apply that, but he's even cautious. While he thinks the New Testament is just a story and he's a mythicist in that sense, he's even cautious in how he interprets. He does not agree with Amen in so many ways. So anyway.
Well, speaking of Karl Ruck, let's take a look.
Let's take a look.
How he corroborates Onan.
In Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, there are only 8,000 unique words. In ancient Greek, somewhere around 1.5 million.
Wow.
Look, how many words did ancient Hebrew have? According to Gilad Zuckerman, the number of tested biblical Hebrew words is 8,198. Bear that in mind. Ready? Hit me with the TLG. This is the Thesaurus Lingua Graecae. Watch. The number of Greek words in the corpus amounts to 110 million. While the number of unique word forms, and this is the one that's really important, I want you to pay attention as future classical philologists. Unique word forms is at 1.6 million. How many did we have in Hebrew? A couple thousand. Greek has between, it's been estimated 250,000 to upward, I've seen upward of 500,000 unique words. Just to give you a way to compare it, ancient Hebrew has about 8,000. The unique word count alone is off the chart for Greek. It is a superior language that devoured languages in antiquity. It just ate them up. Greek was the behemoth. It was the dragon of antiquity. Modern Greek is nothing like it.
So I go into more detail in this video if you want.
The idea that modern Greek is totally different from ancient Greek can be easily disproven by simply cherry-picking examples of where it's completely obvious that modern Greek still carries on a lot of the core grammar and vocabulary of its ancestor, ancient Greek, with specific modifications. The noun declension system is very much intact, especially when it comes to literary vocabulary that's been inherited from ancient Greek. Modern Greek nouns have lost the dative case, even though it's preserved in many set phrases. And the verb conjugation system is very different, but it maintains the core system of verbal aspect, mood, and voice, which enhances the ability of modern Greek speakers to acquire proficiency in ancient Greek if they choose to study it.
This is everybody, I'll tell you a secret, everybody who studies who's ever been exposed to ancient Greek, and this includes modern Greeks, and I studied with modern Greeks, I can tell you for a fact, it is humbling. Ancient Greek is humbling. 1.5 million. That's a ton of unique words. Think of the brain power it takes to be able to produce that. Because modern Greek is the result, is the offspring of the church forcing itself on Mother Greek. And what happens? You get modern Greek. Right? So, it's not the same. 1.7 million. Nobody. Modern Greek is probably 60,000, 70,000. There's no way.
That's one of the largest modern Greek lexicons with 150,000 lemmas.
Και επειδή ρωτάνε συνήθως πόσες λέξεις είχε η αρχαία, Ξέρουμε από τον ίδιο Σκοτ Jones ότι είχε 125.000 σωζόμενες, μαρτυρούμενες λέξεις. Όμως ο Βιλαμόβιτς μας λέει ότι τα κείμενα τα οποία έχουν σωθεί είναι μόλις το 1/5 της αρχαίας γραμματείας. Επομένως, το ότι έχουμε αυτές τις 125.000 λέξεις είναι σε σχέση με τα κείμενα που έχουν σωθεί. Έχουμε ένα τεράστιο αριθμό λέξεων που έχει χαθεί διότι δεν κατεγράφει.
So that was the guy who authored, that's Georgios Babiniotis, who authored the modern Greek lexicon, who is explaining for anybody who is just listening and didn't get a chance to read the subtitles I have there. He's showing that we have, he quotes 125,000 words preserved in the TLG that are just probably a fifth of the text that we have recorded, that we just have attested. And when we uncover some new tests, some new texts, some new discovery of manuscripts, sometimes we just find new words, right? Because there's just so much Greek literature out there. And for Hebrew, because of the nature of the texts that the Jewish people chose to preserve, we just got the Bible.
It's also interesting to think about geographically how large the area may have been and the amount of people in comparison to Greek and how long that had influence, and then factoring in where Hellenism starts to spread, right? Now you have other people starting to speak your language. At what point in history, if we're doing apples to apples, at what point in history do you actually have Hebrews dominating entire cultures and making them speak their language, now creating new words, adding new ideas? Like, there's just a lot more. And yes, there is some admission here. Preserved Greek, we have so much more preserved. That's why I told people, go check out your original video that's part one to this, because you're going to go into all of that and debunk this apologetic that is being presented by Amen as if this language is just a superior language. Rather, we're just missing evidence. There's just a lot we just don't have, like you just said.
Hebrew.
For Hebrew.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and he's also taking a 3,000-year span of Greek that includes Byzantine and some modern Greek sources into the mix. So he's pointing at like the number of words that would have been in the language in a specific period of time, and that is not the 275,000 limata, the lemmas that are the dictionary forms of those words. That's coming from all over the place. That's coming from Homer. In the Hellenistic period, you had people making lexicons to define these terms from Homer because they didn't have them anymore in the language. They dropped out of the language, but they're preserved in writing. So if you were just to take a snapshot of how many words an individual native speaker of Greek would have a command of in a specific period, it's not that many. You can. My other video goes into all of like how many words did Homer use, how many words did Plato use, how many words did Aristotle use. If you just look at the Homeric corpus, it's like 15,000, like some of them are like 10,000. That's how many an individual person uses in a small corpus. It's comparable to the Hebrew Bible. And I have all of those statistics, all that data is there in the original video.
Go check it out after this video or now.
So, look, by the way, Dan, I can hear modern Greek in what you're saying, which is seminaries do this because they do not teach Greek well, but this dude, whose pronunciation betrays his seminary training, like the sound of a seminarian gagging on some kind of medical applicator. Yes, that's what the grade that I give you. Yes, you get the seminarian gag. Fantastic. Oh, God.
Without getting into the weeds about ancient Greek pronunciation, I'll simply note that it's common in academic circles outside of Greece for scholars to use a variety of reconstructed pronunciation systems like Erasmian pronunciation. In Greece, there are over 10 million native speakers of modern Greek who can natively articulate ancient Greek, using the ecclesiastical pronunciation you hear in the Greek Orthodox Church. This is the pronunciation you'll hear me strive for in this video, which is incredibly useful for people who want to acquire Greek as a living language and model their speech on the cadence of native speakers. Since Dr. Hillman makes fun of his critics for their pronunciation, his stilted failure to articulate Greek is fair game. I'd like to draw attention to a handful of Greek words that he habitually butchers by putting emphasis on unstressed syllables where they don't belong, because they don't have accent marks. Whenever he mispronounces a word this way, it will be flagged with a buzzer. So for the record, the adjective deadly is pronounced thanasimos, with a stress on the antepenultimate syllable. Dr. Hillman mispronounces it as thanasimo in the phrase something deadly, thanasimonti, which he thinks is a drug. The feminine noun that sometimes refers to the reported efficacy of a therapeutic medicine is pronounced evangelia, with the stress on the penultimate syllable. Dr. Hillman mispronounces it as evangelion, as if it were neuter, trying to make it sound like evangelion, which means gospel. Lastly, there are Hillman's 3 favorite words where he misplaces the emphasis on the second to last penultimate syllable, even though the accent mark is over the last ultimate syllable. The adjective naked is not pronounced gumnos. Greeks pronounce it like gymnos, and in Attic Greek it may have sounded like gumnos, but not gumnos. He's popularized the mispronunciation of the noun translated as bandit, saying it like leistes. Greeks today pronounce this word like listis. In Attic Greek, it may have sounded closer to leistes or leistes, but not leistes. Lastly, the word for linen cloth or linen garment is not sindon, it's sindon, or maybe sindon in ancient Greek.
Are you the only one that's translating this stuff this way?
No,
there's other people.
No, I'm just the first one to have guts to do it.
Are there other classicists or linguists who have translated these same texts you are and corroborating what you're saying?
Yeah, Dr. Ruck, for example, and that's why I always throw him out as my corroborator. Dr. Ruck will tell you, because he and I translated Apocalypse together, and I showed him my breakdown and outline of it. And so he can tell you, all I'm doing is translating. I'm not. None of this stuff is made up. It's just straight up translations. But it's translations coming from somebody who's actually read the medical side and read the science side and can talk about what the terms are actually doing. This is the battle I've been fighting. Nobody reads their Bible anymore. People need to read the Bible, right? Because there's a kid with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? Raise your hand if you've heard of the kid with Jesus. Look, it's only a couple people.
He's not a kid, but
Sorry, young man. Young man with Jesus. Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry. But like, to me, he's a kid, right? Yeah. No, this is a younger. This is not a.
To me, he's a
The
kid.
age group that Dr. Ruck is referring to is how the kid is. He's a neoniskos. He's a gumnos neoniskos. Somewhere around puberty, maybe a little bit before, scholars will argue about how late it goes.
What, dude?
You're exactly right. It's about puberty, right? And that's where his range is. So they're using these drugs, and that's what's disturbing. This is where it kind of gets disturbing. It reminds me of the touching of Jesus when he touched the little children. And Dr. Ruck can verify this, so you don't think I'm a quack. The word that the Greek uses. Remember, the situation is Jesus is touching children. Parents are coming to the disciples and saying, "Make him stop touching the children." Right? And then he's like, they come to him like, they don't want you to touch the children anymore. And he's like, he gets upset and he's like, "You're going to scandalize this whole situation. What are you doing?" That word for touch is the same word that's used for so there's this fine, it can just be regular touching, but it's also stroking. It's also stroking. So is there something about the feeling and within the religious context of the feeling and the feet with the hair and I think there is. Was he touching little children, Carl Ruck?
The stories told about Jesus, people telling the stories, we're not trying to say that Jesus wasn't children.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Case
It was
closed.
just for some reason the parents wanted him to stop touching. Why do you think the parents wanted him to stop touching the children in a way that would scandalize them?
Well, which verse are you talking about?
Just look up Jesus touching children. It's in one of the Gospels. Maybe probably more than one.
Oh, but you're talking about when he's in the garden and he has the
I think it's not. It's not. when we started this process, I told you, congregation, I told you, the devil told me, you can't lie to them at all. And I was like, not at all? Even just once? Like, maybe if I don't want somebody's feelings to get hurt? And he said, no, 0. And I said, why? And he said, because your credibility will be very important. And they will try to break you through your credibility. If they can't, he said, they will put words in your mouth. Right? I have no arguments for you. I have no opinions. You can quote me as saying nothing that thou shouldst do or not do anything. Yeah. Here, we serve the text, baby. This is the museum. We serve the text. Now, I'm going to give you my translation, which is going to differ from modern, or at least classically important translations, and I'll show you. One of them is by Browning. Here's the Browning translation. Yeah, and here and there, heaven high, the torch uplifts, flame medicated with persuasions mild, with foul admixture unbeguiled of holy unguent, from the clotted chrism, brought from the palace, sink in its abysm. That, by the way, Robert Browning made up that word, right? Which is something, yeah, he did. Chewy's looking at me like, are you kidding? No, he had to find something to rhyme chrism, right? So he just made it up. But I'm going to give you my translation, right? So, here and there, this very tall Amazonian, what is she doing? She's waving her torches, because these are night rites that the priesthoods are involved in, right? You realize, right? We caught her right in the act of the rites. And what is she? Look at that fourth line down. Pharmasomene. Pharmasomene. Covered with drugs, under the influence of drugs. What kind of drugs? The royal drug that comes from her innermost recesses. The holy Christing, powered by that painkiller that causes us to be softened. She is covered with the drugs. She is Christing. She is Christing. What is that pharmos? So I just want you to be in there. I want you to be in there and realize it means treat by using pharmaca, generally treat, right? And it talks about Homer. So it goes all the way back to Homer. We got it connected with methu, which is where we get drunken or intoxicated. And it means number 2, to enchant or bewitch by potions or filters. Now remember, when they say enchant or bewitch, they've taken you into the back alley.
There
right?
it is.
That enchantment.
That's his
that
source.
Enchantment is a change to your mental state. And remember what these people like Prime Minister are doing.
LSD tells you.
They're putting the purple in their hair.
Hillman's blatant mistranslation of Aeschylus should give anyone pause if they take him seriously as a classicist. Here his translation is describing Clytemnestra as being covered with drugs and under the influence of drugs. Hillman insinuates that the antecedent of the adjective pharmasomeni is Clytemnestra, and his translation reflects this. He says that Clytemnestra is covered with drugs, under the influence of drugs. That is not the case. He translates Cherima as Christing, even though that is completely nonsensical. If you look at the complete text of Agamemnon, lines 83 to 96, it becomes very clear that Clytemnestra cannot be the antecedent of the adjective pharmasomeni. Anyone can clearly see that the antecedent is lambas. And if you look at any standard translation from Browning or Summerstein or Smith, they all display an awareness that the antecedent of medicined or flame medicated is the flame itself. It's the torch itself. The LSJ entry makes this explicitly clear.
Abelthon, eis ta opiso, kai episan hamai. Yeah, so they said, "Are you Jesus?" He said, "I am." And it says they went around to his back. They circled him. They were around him so he couldn't get away. And episan hamai, they fell on him. They attacked. The Greek uses this for falling all the time. All the time. One enemy falls upon another. You know, so they surround him and they take him, they start to arrest him. They grab him.
In John 18:6, episan chame simply means fell to the ground. It doesn't mean they fell on top of Jesus. This is confirmed by simply looking up the definition of chame, on the ground. There's no documented usage to support the interpretation of fell on in the sense of attack. In John 9:6, Jesus spit on the ground, eptisen chame, and made mud from the saliva and applied epechrisen, the mud, to his eyes. Here it's epichrio, to rub on the surface. In Mark 8:23, Jesus spits directly into the man's eyes but doesn't rub anything in. And in Mark 10, Jesus declares, "Your faith has healed you," where he didn't need to use the eye salve at all.
Look at the epichristos. I love this. Smeared on, right? Painted, right? Give me the next one. There's a companion flower there. I love that. They don't need to see that one. And here's the Anchristos. I just want you to see it, people. Look, here is the word Christ. Danny Jones, please, look at this word. You can see it in the Greek, and it says, in Christ station. And it's something that you rub into somebody. And where do you rub it? Look at the Greek in the blue. It's in the blue. Eistus ophthalmos. Oh, isn't it? Greek is so sexy. Ancient Greek. Modern Greek is not ancient Greek.
When the verb chrio is used with the prefix en, it implies to rub in. We say that in English as well. It just means to anoint, chrio, in a way that is a bit more thorough. En chrio. To anoint or to anoint oneself. And this form of the verb is used in classical literature to refer to stinging and pricking.
Oh God, after this I saw a huge crowd. And nobody was able to, it was so big, nobody was able to number it, right?
Oh shit.
And from all the, where did these people come
We got
from?
30 seconds left, so I'm gonna have to clean that brush
Every
later.
tribe,
So
every
anyway,
people,
that sets in a ground,
languages,
and
standing
I had never
before
heard
the
of this
throne,
guy Ammon
and
before. Just checking out this debunking video. Features Carl Ruck and some interesting Greek
what did they have?
stories, but my God, this guy's crackers. So anyway, that's that. I just posted it if anybody wants to check this out. Anyway, it's Adam Sturch Podcast from the Mushroom Mansion to House, New Mexico, working on oil painting, conscientious, emergence. Have a good night, Earth.